Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist, where we teach you political lessons from the purple state of New Hampshire so you can advocate for liberty no matter where you live. I'm Melissa Blasek. I'm a former New Hampshire state representative and the current executive director and lobbyist for a grassroots liberty organization called Rebuild NH. We have a packed episode for you today. This one might be a little longer than normal, and it's primarily going to be in a subject that's been on my mind a lot. And honestly, it might be an episode that angers people, and that's okay because we can have conversations and discussions about things. Before we get into that, what if the next big crash is already in motion and almost no one sees it coming? Every major economic collapse since 1929 was preceded by the same 7 warning signals. And right now, all 7 are flashing red at the same time. These aren't headlines. They're deep market indicators that Wall Street prefers you never to hear about. That's why our friends at American Alternative Assets created the Bellwether Signal, a free report that reveals what these signals mean and how smart Americans are protecting their savings with gold and silver before it's too late. You can download your free copy right now at cloutgold.com or call us at 855-803-GOLD. Again, that's cloutgold.com or call 1-855-803-4653. Get the facts, protect your future, and don't wait for the headlines to catch up. I would be remiss if I did not give post-election analysis. I have thoughts, of course. I have thoughts. Also, you might want to hear some maybe slight bright sides. No surprise that the GOP got destroyed on Tuesday night. I could have told you that was going to happen a year ago after the 2024 election because we live in a hyper-partisan nation. And what that means is that people vote against the guy who's left holding the bag when the economy is falling out. And while both Republicans and Democrats are responsible for the economy falling out, Republicans ran against Biden inflation, remember that? And that is how they won in 24. And then they completely abandoned the message and pretended as if suddenly, because they got elected, that a switch had flipped and the economy really wasn't bad, you guys. It's actually really good. The gaslighting I have seen out of the Republican Party has been atrocious. And I've been screaming from the mountaintops to stop gaslighting people. You can't tell them to see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil. Okay? They know what their own reality is. And you just anger them when you tell them that their truth is not the truth. So yeah, I mean, that's where we're at now. Obviously, it was in some ways actually worse than I thought. I didn't think New Jersey was in play. I didn't think Virginia was in play, but I didn't think the losses would be quite as bad as they were. The margins were worse than anticipated. I will say New Hampshire did not fare quite as badly. We only have in these off years city elections, and it wasn't great. But it wasn't terrible either. And we actually had some really surprising and large victories in surprising places. I think we're enjoying a bit of a demographic shift in New Hampshire because we are at this point truly the last bastion of freedom of the entire Northeast. And we have seen a dramatic demographic shift in new movers being Republicans. So I think that that's what we're seeing. But overall, bad night, not surprisingly bad at all. What this means, we are now 10 years into MAGA. So we have trends and data to look at to understand what's really going on. And overall, if I'm giving the 1,000-foot view of the problems with the GOP, it is MAGA has a persona problem. And overall, Democrats are winning way more than they should be. And you might be saying, well, but Donald Trump is president. Well, yes, and he has been twice in the last 10 years. And since 2016, though, Democrats have enjoyed the reactionary midterms against Republicans. They had their blue wave in 2018. If Tuesday was any indication, they will absolutely get their blue wave in 2026. And they had a pretty good 2020 as well. Republicans, when they won in 2024, barely eked out a victory. And they didn't get their reactionary backlash red wave against the Democrats in 2022. That was the red wave that never happened. So, overall, if we're kind of just looking at the scoreboard here, Democrats are doing much better than Republicans are. And that should be a warning sign to Republican voters. What you're doing ain't working electorally. And if you can't win elections, you can't govern. And I know Republicans pretended in 2024 that we had some huge victory because there was a big electoral college, racking up of points. But the reality is, he was handful of votes in a couple of states away from losing and Kamala Harris being president of the United States. And the down ballot victory was anemic at best. States didn't do well. We have such a tight majority in Congress. And it's because it just simply doesn't translate. For whatever reason, Trump seems to be able to eke out these little victories when he's running against an unpopular incumbent party. When he is the unpopular incumbent party, he can't win at all. We saw that in 2020. But he seems to be able to eke out these little victories against an unpopular incumbent party. I think he kind of gets around the margins, gets a little bit more minorities, a little bit more young men. These are people who are not conservative, and they're not reliable voters also. The mainstay reliable voter is the white suburban voter. And that is where MAGA has struggled since the beginning. And maybe you can say it's fair or unfair, but they don't like the persona. They don't like it. They have made that very clear. And they are the mainstay voter. And whatever little thing that Trump gets, as a backlash to Democrats when he's physically on the ballot, doesn't seem to translate that well down ballot, number one. And number two, it seems to be people who are unwilling to come out and vote when Donald Trump is not on the ballot. Now, I'm not saying that if the Republicans had had an economic message other than gaslighting, that they would have won on Tuesday or that they can win in 26. But they could stop the bleeding, maybe? Like it could be less bad. You can't gaslight your voters. And what is the economic message that we are running on other than, no, the economy is great? What are we running on? Chaotic tariff policies that are hurting American industries, that have driven China into the hands of people that we probably don't, that we didn't starve them. They just went elsewhere. They're going to like Japan and all these other countries. And that's because we decided to start this chaotic tariff war with the entire world at one time. What else do we have? We have lots of foreign entanglements, way more than I anticipated. We have, I don't know, ballrooms. Gosh, I think that's about it. And prices are actually really low, you guys. And I know because I've been to a grocery store. Yeah, right. Moving forward, my question for the GOP is, what's your message? Because tariffs, crony capitalism, and ballrooms ain't gonna cut it anymore. Before we bring on our guest, are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see plump, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen made with only types 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body, found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. Types 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless native path collagen can be added to anything coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals. You get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 five-star reviews, and an 365-day no risk guarantee, Native Path is a trusted choice. Plus, they offer an 800 number for any questions about usage, recipes, ingredients, and you will speak to a real person ready to help. Join the private Facebook community to share success stories, recipes, and support each other on this journey called life. Visit getnativepath.com/dailyclout and start your transformation today. That is GETNATIVE.com/DAILYCLOUT. We're going to bring on Middle East foreign policy expert David Reaboi, and we're going to have a much needed conversation about what I think is tearing the right apart and why I don't think that we can really move on until we sort ourselves out and clean up our court. So let's get going with that. Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist, Middle East foreign policy expert David Reaboi. Thanks for joining me.
Great to be with you.
I have had this show on my mind for a while, and I think I've been sort of avoiding doing it, but it just feels like I got to do it. Now, this is not going I was going to do this show regardless of whether there was an election on Tuesday or not, but I feel like I would be slightly remiss if I didn't sort of tie some threads together a little bit. Obviously, the outcome was mostly due to the economy. I think we all saw that coming. But overall, I would say, MAGA has a persona issue, and some of it is blown completely out of proportion for political reasons. But unfortunately, there is a real, what I used to think was a minority of people, a very, very tiny, tiny minority of people. But I feel like it's growing and it's taking root in very disturbing ways. We used to kick these people out of the tent. We got rid of David Duke and all of his friends for a reason. And here we are kind of again. So I want to start with this question because I think definitions are important. What is your definition of anti Semitism?
This is a great question. This is a great question. I think it's the key question, and it's actually the subject of a piece that I just wrote for Tablet. Um, and uh, and I'm not sure if it'll be up by the time this goes live, but it will be up shortly. Um, so anti-Semitism is really a conspiracy theory about the way the world works. And it is one that puts Jews at the center, the like let's say the malevolent force, the so-called malevolent force of Jews at the center of world events, as a way of explaining these things. And for a lot of people, for anti-Semites, the um, the existence of the Jew takes on an eschatological meaning, and the fight against whatever evil you think is out there in the world, and is to be had against the Jew, because he symbolizes, or Jews symbolize, the opposition to the one true thing. So, for example, when I mean, what are uh people's imaginings about Satan or the devil, or something like that, and either in secular contexts as well, it's the same thing. I mean, how else would you understand the centrality of something like Israel to the global left? Why would Greta Thunberg decide that, in fact, the destruction of Israel is a far greater cause than climate change, than the climate of the entire world, than saving the world?
Wow. Like I wish I'd started investing in gold 10 years ago. There's no time too late or too soon to invest in gold? What if the next big crash is already in motion and almost no one sees it coming? Got to think about that. Every major economic collapse since 1929 was preceded by the same 7 warning signals. Right now, all 7 are flashing red. These are not headlines, they are deep market indicators that Wall Street prefers you never to hear about, because Wall Street doesn't want you to know what Wall Street knows. That's why our friends at American Alternative Assets created the Bellwether Signal. And this is a free report that reveals what these signals mean and how smart Americans are protecting their savings with buying gold and silver before it's too late. So important. So download your free copy at cloutgold.com, or call the company at 1-855-803-GOLD. That's 855-803-4653, 855-803-4653. You should really get the facts to protect your future, and don't wait for the headlines to catch you off guard. Honestly, gold has gone up and up and up so much, and silver is rising, and there's so much instability in this world. I'm so relieved that we're able to invest in gold, our, little nest egg. We don't want it to be at risk. So it's wonderful to have American Alternative Assets as a trusted source for gold investment and silver investment.
I mean, this is kind of crazy stuff, and if you you really have to stop and kind of take a step back and say what is going on here, because it's certainly not normal. And it's just kind of very interesting throughout history that whatever a particular civilization um, uh, reviles, very often, if there's going to be anti-Semites there, the Jew will embody it. I mean, it's a very strange phenomenon how Jews can be blamed by leftists for, villainized by the left as being on the right, but the communists say that the Jews are fascists, and the fascists say that the Jews are communists, and, and on and on and on it goes. And the only constant is that, like, everyone hates the Jews.
Mhm.
And
I want
so
I want
so
to read to
that's
you
yes.
a quote. I actually transcribed this from an old C-SPAN clip, and I'm going to read it to you. It's a criticism of Pat Buchanan from
Hmm.
1999, and I want you to think about, and maybe you know who said it, but I'm not going to tell you until after. And I want to know whether you agree with his definition of anti-Semitism in his criticism of Pat Buchanan. This is part of the sad thing about Pat Buchanan. Pat does raise issues that I think are important. The sovereignty of American military. These are not issues that are crank issues, but unfortunately, Pat Buchanan raises them in a way that I think is discredited. And when attacked, he can always fall back to the line of, well, the cabal that controls American politics doesn't like me because I speak truth to power. This is almost verbatim what he said the other day. In every way, he casts himself as the victim, someone who is so, quote, truthful that he's being hunted down by the conspiracy that runs Washington. Maybe Pat just says things that are kind of kooky, and that's why he's criticized. It's perfectly valid to question America's relationship with Israel. Israel has a lobby. It's perfectly fair, as far as I'm concerned, to beat up on Israel's lobby. But I don't think that's the reason why Pat Buchanan is being labeled an anti Semite. It's this relentless bringing up of topics related to Judaism. Famously, Pat always beats up on Goldman Sachs and never Morgan Stanley. There is no point at which Pat has held a press conference and said, well, I really don't like the Jews, and I think that they're the sinister force in America. But I think, and it took me years to come to this, and I'm not throwing about the term anti Semitism around, but you reach a point where you say, geez, here's a guy who has gone out of his way to defend accused Nazi war criminals, constantly attack Israel, attacking American Jews for supporting Israel, who's implied that American Jews push Americans into war in which non-Jews die. And there really is, and I do believe there is a pattern with Pat Buchanan of needling the Jews. Is that anti-Semitic? Yeah. Who do you think said that?
Can I guess?
Yes.
I'm gonna guess Tucker Carlson. my
Yes,
buddy.
yes. Tucker Carlson did say that 26 years ago. And I have to say, I think that's maybe a little bit harsh to Pat Buchanan, but it is a perfect description of Tucker Carlson today. I mean,
I don't think it's harsh to be candidate at all, actually.
okay.
But look, when I was young, I supported Pat Buchanan's candidacy. And this was actually prior to a lot of the anti-Semitic accusations. I shouldn't say the anti-Semitic accusations. It was prior to me. No, I was young. All I knew was what was out there, what was on, being covered on C-SPAN. I didn't know, for example, that the guy spent his time, um, advocating for every concentration camp guard that he could find.
Right.
And then I also didn't know, at that time it was well, probably what, 1980, late 80s, early 90s. um so this was before the 9/11 and the Gulf War and any of that stuff. And which he would kind of subsequently, kind of take the opportunity to go crazy during that time
Hmm.
and down into his Zog, Zionist occupied government,
Hmm.
rabbit hole. And I mean, in addition to that, the guy was, yeah, I mean, I think Buchanan is actually a perfect case through which to understand Carlson and really anti-Semitism, because the people now, and especially on Twitter and in podcasts, they want to go and they want to go and they want to say, here is this one little clip. Here is Tucker Carlson at Charlie Kirk's funeral, and if this clip isn't anti-Semitic, if this clip doesn't say I hate the Jews, you know, completely obviously, then your whole case against him is
Right. It's
nonsense,
spoiled.
right?
Here's
Well,
my definition of
but
all.
you're supposed to put these things together. So, like, Pat Buchanan, hated, despised Israel, really, really despised Israel, really, really despised the people who support Israel. Okay, fine. We may have an intelligent disagreement, but the same guy is also running around, defending concentration camp guards and claiming that we should have sided with Hitler in World War II, where Churchill was the real villain. And
Mhm.
like, you put all these things together, and you have to be an it. You have to. I'm sorry, you can't be an idiot. You have to be unbelievably dishonest to put these things together and not think that there is a linkage between all of these things. I think you're absolutely gaslighting if you're denying that.
I think, obviously, if you are calling for violence against Jews, if you are denying the Holocaust, we can all clearly say that's anti Semitism, but that's such a narrow vision of it. And I don't want to throw it around needlessly. I do think that you can absolutely criticize the government of Israel. And I criticize my government all the time, pretty constantly, actually. And it's fine to criticize a government and their actions. But what is anti Semitic is when you make everything about Israel, when you make everything about the Jews, when you only talk about Israeli lobbying in the United States, when Israel doesn't spend a fraction of what other countries spend lobbying US politicians in the United States. What I think is anti Semitic is when you make it so that Israel has to be last in any foreign intervention, when you don't allow them to win a war, when you don't allow them to fight a war the way every other democratic Western nation would ever fight a defensive war. I think it's also anti Semitic when you only bring up foreign aid to Israel and not to the other many, 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 many dozens of countries that we give foreign aid to, that frankly gets flushed down the toilet in a way that doesn't even happen with Israel. And when you add up all of those things, that is all anti Semitism. Would you agree with
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I would agree. I would press more on this criticism of Israel point that these guys always try to make, which
Mhm.
is which is, I mean, it's unbelievably ridiculous. Um, we have things called libel laws. We have a concept of someone lying. We have all of these things that a cynical person like the one who claims that this is only criticism of Israel can just call criticism. You know, I mean, you know, the criticism, it depends on what you say. You know, like obviously, I mean, you're free to say anything about anything,
Mhm.
a foreign government or the American government. I mean, we know that. Everyone knows that. Nobody's denying that.
Mhm.
But the content of that criticism, you know, whether or not we judge you for the content of that criticism, you know, I mean, of course, that's a natural thing that's going to happen. Um, you know, I find that what usually flies under the banner of criticism of Israel is, you know, back to the gas chamber, Jew, which is the kind of replies that I get on Twitter. And I'm not saying that all of those things, I'm not saying that you know, that defines every dishonest, you know, criticism of Israel, but it's an illustration that it actually runs the gamut. You know, I think like I have an absolute right to be disgusted with Tucker Carlson or Megyn Kelly or anybody who shows up and say, you know, or JD Vance when he shows up and he you know, alleges that you know, that Israel does not treat Christians well.
Yes,
I
that's
think
not a
that's,
valid criticism. That's completely a
you
lie.
know, it's, yeah, you know, I mean, the other day, on Dave Smith's show, Carlson said that Israel routinely attacks and murders Christians. I'm sorry, you know what that is? That's pogrom fuel. That's blood libel stuff. He wants pogroms. He wants Jews harmed, you know, and or killed.
Mhm.
The only reason to come up with lies like that is to inspire people to be angrier and angry. And if you look at his content,
Against you.
if you look at Candace Owens's content, everything is geared towards making sure white American Christians will do harm to pro-Israel Jews in, you know, in the United States. This is way far beyond any kind of foreign policy discussion. Um, and this is, you know, but this is the
Well,
one
I mean, it's the same thing,
that
you know, the Gazan civilian lies, the you know, the fake hunger or starvation crisis, the mass murder of Gazan civilians. I mean, all of that is factually not true, and yet they perpetuated it at such a rate that it became completely mainstreamed. And now we're going into yet an even new territory of they're just killing Christians in Israel. Like, I mean, yeah, though that you're right. So there's criticism of a government, and then there is outright libel, right?
yeah, I mean, there's outright libel with the intent to you know, with the intent
To incite violence.
to incite violence. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm not saying that what he's doing is illegal under American law. It plainly is not. He's actually free to incite violence against Jews as long as it's not, you know, as long as it passes the Brandenburg test and is not, doesn't have imminence.
Yeah.
As long as he doesn't say, you know, I want you to kill Jews on Friday in Tulsa, he's okay. However, I can, you know, my First Amendment right includes the ability to tell him that he's a piece of garbage and a scumbag for, you know, for deliberately trying to incite, you know, to incite violence against Jews.
Mhm.
And you know, maybe, like, let's say the best possible scenario is he's okay with American Jews being harmed and or killed. He's okay with rising, like, real anti-Semitism. He's okay with rising hatred of Jews and distrust of Jews in the United States, if only he gets the foreign policy that he wants, where the United States, like, you know, completely pulls away from Israel. You know,
Let's talk
like,
about that. I want to come back
maybe,
to,
right?
right. I want to get into the Tucker Fuentes Kelly like nonsense later and the heritage stuff. I mean, I want to get into that, but let's talk about foreign policy and these non-interventionists. Now, I hang out with the libertarian types. I really consider myself to be a very libertarian leaning Republican. I always have. These are my friends. And I hear rhetoric, even from friends of mine who I know don't hate me and don't hate Jews and like would never, but they don't even understand what they're repeating sometimes. And so, okay, I don't believe that a lot of these people who claim to be non-interventionists, and I'm not like talking about my personal friends, I'm talking about like the Tucker Carlsons of
Sure.
the world, right? The JD Vances of the world. I don't believe that they are actually non-interventionists. I believe firmly that they are significantly more into interventionism than you or I are. I believe that they want every type of intervention as long as it's on behalf of Islam and as long as Israel ends up last. And frankly, that means also that the United States will end up last. I believe that their little brand of non interventionism is an America last policy. And that they're really only about supporting the other side no matter what. And I think case in point was this most recent ceasefire deal. That was just the Biden deal rebranded by Donald Trump, that Biden didn't have the political power to make Israel accept, but Trump, as the most, pro-Israel American president, had the power to accept. It was a terrible deal for them. And so I do believe that they are actually, what all it really means for us is that we're way more involved in that conflict. Like, we should just be letting Israel take out the trash for us and stay the hell out of it. But instead, we are all involved in it now. And the Tuckers and the Vances, they all cheered this deal. Do you agree with me about this, like that the non-interventionists are really just like hyper interventionists when it comes to Israel?
Yeah. Oh no, I mean, completely, completely. I figured these guys out way back when, um, way back when in the olden days, it used to be the old argument was, let's say they called themselves the realists, and the realists said, hey, it's really silly that we are supporting Israel on one hand, it's tiny, it's got no resources, and then we have the entire Arab world on the other hand. And the smart money is really saying abandoning Israel and going with whatever the Arabs want because that's better for us.
Mhm.
Now, I thought that case was not moral. I'm not even sure if it was, if it was like, a good strategic deal, but I don't think it was crazy. I think it was definitely, and frankly, through most of Israel's history as a country, that was the prevailing attitude of the United States. The U.S.-Israel relationship was that, up until the late 70s,
Mhm.
or let's say the mid 70s.
Mhm.
It was that. It was like, okay, we're not going to, the Arabs are definitely the senior partners here,
Mhm.
and and maybe we'll give Israel some scraps, but it's not in anyone's interest to like get behind Israel in a big way. I mean, that changed. That changed later on, for a number of reasons, mostly because the Arabs sided with, or the Arabs ended up siding with the Soviets, and we were left with Israel. And it's like, Israel is, in fact, a better bet than all of these other countries, because of their people, because of their productivity, and everything, even despite the oil. But anyway, so that was the prevailing like American conservative position, even during during the second Gulf War, during
Mhm.
and the Iraq War. This was it. And then something interesting happened, which was around the time of the Arab Spring. Many of the Gulf Arabs decided, with the exception of Qatar, they decided, hey, you know what? We're actually better off with Israel being here than if disappears,
Mhm.
because we are all together against the Muslim Brotherhood. We are all together against Islamism. We are all together against Iran. And we can actually make something here
Mhm.
together if we partnered with the Israelis. And of course, that ended up leading into the Abraham Accords. So me, naive old me, I watched this and I thought, wow, the American conservative, they must be really happy about all this. But no, what did they do? They flipped hard against Saudi Arabia. They flipped hard against the Emirates. Um, Glenn Greenwald and Dave Smith went wall to wall about the Saudis' war against the Houthis in Yemen without once, not once did they say the Houthis. It was the Saudis genocide against the Saudi genocide in Yemen with American weapons and blah blah blah. It was the biggest propaganda bullshit thing that ever was. But all of a sudden, these people went from loving the Arabs to really, really hating them, depending on their relationship with Israel.
Right. Right.
And I was like, wow, that's kind of that's kind of interesting. That's kind of giving the game away. And really, since then, it's been obvious that none of these people are serious political analysts, geopolitical analysts. They talk about Mearsheimer being, some kind of a grand poobah of the realist school, someone that they look up to with academic credentials. Well, he is not. He is very long in the tooth, and he is not doing any credible work. He's not. I mean, he's his the things he says on Carlson's show and elsewhere are completely batshit crazy.
Mhm.
All of the analysts that these people use, from Doug McGregor to Jeffrey Sachs to Kirk Mills to whoever. I mean, these are people with no understanding of the region or of foreign policy. Full stop. And that's not just a slur on their intellect and abilities. That's an assessment of their predictions.
Mhm.
These people have been wrong up and down and up and down. And when you're that wrong in the same direction all the time, you're not an analyst, you are a propagandist, and you're just kind of saying stuff.
Mhm.
So now, getting to the people in the United States, like the libertarians, I think we have a phenomenon where some people over the last several years, I call it rapid onset right wing online retardation. Maybe it needs an acronym, but what basically
Social
happens
media
is
is making us stupider.
yeah, I mean, a bunch of people who know better. And I'm saying I know that they know better because I know some of these people. It's like they outsource their part of their brain to stupid podcasters with no education, and the next thing they know, they're just sprouting nonsense. I mean, I heard a story about Kevin Roberts, the Heritage Foundation president, who, like, whatever, I've been friendly with for years. I mean, he stole my catchphrase. You need to know what time it is. Um, and he's given me credit for that before. But, like, so I've known this guy, and apparently he told someone internally. He said I'm pro-Israel, but I'm not a Zionist. And the follow-up question, perplexed. A questioner this weekend at Heritage asked him, like, okay, so what do you think, like, what
What does
in
that
your mind
mean?
is Zionism?
Mhm.
And he didn't know. He couldn't define
Hard to
it.
say you're
And
not something if you don't know what it is.
yeah, yeah, right. And I shook my head. I heard this and I said, you know what? 2 years ago, he would have nailed this out of the park. He would have been answering, he would have been he would have very easily answered this. Like, yes, of course, Zionism is the
Very simple.
belief that the Jews should have a national, a homeland, a national home. Full stop, done. It doesn't mean any kind of theological basis for anything. That's a whole different argument. Um, and so it's very weird. I think what we're seeing with a lot of folks, specifically in this particular niche universe who are highly online, is
Yeah.
that yeah, it's this rapid onset right-wing online retardation thing where they know things and all of a sudden they don't, and you have
Mhm.
to kind of go remedial,
Yeah.
um and say, actually, let me explain to you let me explain to you why we had to use nuclear weapons in Japan to end World War II. I mean,
Oh,
we
right.
thought that
We're
these
on to
things were
that one now
settled.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we thought that these things were settled, and it's like, I don't know. I'm surprised that I woke up one day to find that real authentic America First conservatism was basically the foreign policy platform of the 1984 Democratic Convention.
Yeah.
That was a surprise to me,
It was
the
to me too. And
yeah.
you know what I see in people, like just your average person, honestly, they don't have any like grand political whatever. A lot of people and people, more on the right, they they felt like COVID was some type of, huge lie and that they were lied to
Yeah.
continuously. And now they think that everything is a lie and that there is no truth. And so by going out and trying to, they really think that they're going out and trying to find like the new lie about everything. And what they have stumbled upon is the oldest lie in humanity, which is that the Jews are the cause of all and the root of all evil, and they don't recognize that they're just repeating an ancient blood libel and that they didn't find anything new or discover any kind of new truth. They're simply just repeating patterns. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think COVID, I think
Concerning.
it's pretty I think it's pretty clear that COVID broke a lot of brains
Mhm,
in this country
mhm.
specifically.
Yeah.
You know what I'll say COVID plus social media broke a lot
Mhm,
of brains.
mhm.
Um, and it was through that massive loss of faith, faith in the media, faith in the government, faith in the expert class. um I think a lot of people were so disillusioned by that, then they think like, okay, um whatever, anything is possible.
And I know, but then they act like we always accepted that, like, Israel is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I mean, really? I mean, I don't think we ever really accepted that. I think there's always been a pretty strong contingent of people who were, advocating against Israel or becoming more involved with them or giving them money. I don't think that's anything new, but they're acting like it's some type of brand new thing. Now, you are a foreign policy expert. What would you, if you could wave your magic wand, okay? What would be the future, in your opinion, of US involvement with Israel moving forward?
Oh, I mean, I've been saying for a very long time, and I'm certainly not alone. Uh, I would, I would try, if I was the Israelis, I would try to be as self-sufficient as humanly possible,
Yeah.
from the United States. Look, it's funny because a lot of these crank conspiracy theorists like Dave Smith and others who really know nothing. Like, it's generous to say they know nothing. They know a lot of things that are lies.
Yeah.
Beginning with Scott Horton, I know a lot of these guys are obsessed with this memo that was presented informally to the to the Netanyahu government in the 1990s by my friend David Wormser, called a clean break.
Mhm.
And it forms a part of their conspiracy theory about how supposedly about how the neocons on behalf of Israel wanted to get the Americans to topple Saddam Hussein. Well, the document doesn't say that in the slightest at all.
Yeah.
What it does say is, I mean, what does a clean break mean? A
Mm.
clean break means a clean break from dependence on the United States.
Yes.
And at that time, the situation was much different. At that time, we were dealing with economic aid
Mhm.
in addition to military aid, because the up until Netanyahu became prime minister in the 90s, Israel was a socialist economy basket case.
Yeah.
The economy exploded thanks to Netanyahu, which is why, I
They
mean,
are not economically dependent on us at all.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, exactly. And it's been a very, very long time now. I'm forgetting the precise date, but it's been a very long time now that the United States shut down the economic aid and still
Mhm.
kept the military aid.
Mhm.
Now, what does that do and why? It's
Yeah.
really useful to examine that for a minute. Um, the main proponent, first of all, the military aid that the United States gives Israel is an agreement. It's an agreement that, number one, Israel spend all the money that the US gives on US manufactured products,
Mhm.
meaning it's basically a transfer of funds, not to Israel, but from the United States taxpayer to Lockheed, to Boeing, to all the weapons manufacturers in this country. So, I mean, the Israelis are getting stuff for free, but
It's
but
good
that money,
American, manufacturing. Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
So the biggest lobbyists, in fact, for US military aid are not the Israelis, they're not
No,
APAC, they're
no.
the military industrial complex that is getting free money.
Yeah.
And it's and it's ridiculous. I mean, I always say to people, like, we need to shut down US military aid to Israel right now. I'm like, okay, so then for be prepared for a lot of layoffs across a lot of swing districts
Mhm.
and a lot of congressional districts, because that's where some of these factories are.
Mhm.
And if you really, really want to do that in order to reset the relationship, like, if you think it's worth it, okay, it might be. But know what's at stake here.
Mhm.
And the other thing, so the other side of the coin is, if you're the Israelis, the military aid binds you to only be able to sell weapons, to sell the weapons that you make in the in Israel, to sell weapons to people the United States allows Israel to sell weapons to.
Mhm.
So it effectively neuters their homegrown weapons manufacturing project
Mhm.
by putting the US in the middle of it and saying, well, here's, you can do this. um, when we get to other projects that people oppose for insane reasons, I don't know how anyone would possibly oppose something like the Iron Dome, but yet people do. The Iron Dome was a joint project developed, co-owned by Israel and the United States.
Yeah.
When the United States wanted to do it, and no US weapons manufacturer, weapons company could figure out how to do it. And they just said, okay, well, hey, Israelis, you guys think you can have a go at this? Um, Try it. And the US put the money in, and the Israelis figured out how to do it. And now the US and Israel own this jointly.
Mhm.
And that's to our benefit because that's technology that we own.
Right.
So I'm not sure how that's a bad deal for the United States. Um,
Is it
Number two,
true that
yeah,
what they need to, essentially use the Iron Dome is only manufactured in the United States? Is that true?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the other catch. The other catch is that they can only make the weapons in the United States per part of the agreement,
Right.
which is how they keep their hand in.
Right. And
And
my
yeah,
opinion on all of this is, and yes, I think you laid out a lot of really good realities about what it would actually mean to become completely, militarily disentangled from Israel. Um, my opinion is that politically, we often end up using some of these deals to control and handcuff Israel. It's so funny. They always act like Israel controls us. It's like pretty obvious it's the other way around. Like we're the one who hold out all the cards and we use it and manipulate it politically all the time. And it's frankly an abusive relationship. And if we really wanted to be America first, if all of these people like JD Vance and Tucker Carlson really want to be so America first, they should be advocating for policies to, yes, disentangle us from the United from Israel, and just let them do what they want to do and let them go. But instead, they're advocating for us to further control Israel in other ways, which is just completely backwards, bonkos thinking to me. But yet, to me, it's an abusive relationship. This isn't good for. We don't have the money. They don't have. They don't need us controlling them. They go out there and they take out a lot of the trash in the Middle East that needs to be taken out, and we should just be letting them do that and not be involved in it.
right. Well, I agree with you. And for the last more than 10 years, what I've been advocating for US Middle East policy is, well, I was like, look, a lot of people want to pull back from the Middle East. I do too. I don't want the U.S. to be as involved in there. I don't think we need an air base in Qatar.
Thank
You
you.
know, I don't
Yeah.
think we need all these forward deployments there. The air base in Qatar does not protect Israel.
Mhm.
It protects, it protects the Gulf Arabs from Iran.
Yeah.
Full stop. That's it.
Mhm.
And and the attention on that is constantly being pushed on Israel is in order to make sure that people don't notice that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But really, like, okay, you want to pull back from the Middle East? Okay, I'm with you.
Mhm.
However, you don't just pull back and say, hey, sayonara, we're gone, because we do still have interests there. We have international economic interests there. Um, you can't just pull back, but if you have a military power and a technological power like Israel in that region as an ally, that's when you say, hey, man, you're the sheriff. You police this stuff, you police this neighborhood. If you need us, give us a call, but basically, like, you take out the trash and deal with
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
And it's we would be deputizing the Israelis to basically do that for us so that we don't have to get involved. That's the only America first, um, MAGA, Jacksonian way of understanding the region,
Thank
while
you.
still retaining any type of um, any type of reality, any type of national interest.
Yeah.
And if you come and you say we should just walk away and not care, I'm sorry, you're not a serious person,
Mhm.
and you shouldn't be involved in the political debate.
Mhm.
I'm too tired to constantly remind people of why international economics and natural resources and shipping lanes and things like that are
Matter.
important. If you
Well, you
don't
know what
get
it
this.
is? I think, all of the Bush stuff really tired people. And we wasted, and a lot of people feel this way, that we wasted a lot of time, treasure, and American blood in the Middle East, and we have nothing to show for it. And they're not totally wrong. I mean, I would agree with that. I'm exhausted from it. I think we made a tremendous amount of mistakes. And by the way, Israel tried to warn us not to do that. Um, Even though they like to pretend it's the other way around, but that's literally not reality. Reality was they tried to warn us not to do this. But now there's a reflexive reactionary right that's like, well, because we did all those things badly, we should just isolate ourselves and never be involved in the world ever again and just pretend like that'll just all work out. Now, the reality is that that's not going to work out. You do have to have interactions with the rest of the world. But I think that that's sort of where some of what you were describing there comes from. And it's understandable
Yes.
in some ways. It's just,
Yeah, look, I mean, of course, there are people out there who really don't know anything, and they think that, they believe that, people who say, I want the foreign policy of George Washington, in a world that is completely different than the world that George Washington inhabited.
yeah.
Um, and I mean, look, it's just silly. I think for your random Twitter doofus, maybe that's something that they feel sincerely. But for people who are, I mean, Tucker Carlson is, I mean, yes, he's a deeply stupid guy and he's a crazy guy, but I don't think he's that dumb to not
No, I
believe
don't
that the
think he
U.S.
is.
has interest there. I mean, for one thing, um, I mean, look, the shipping lanes alone is a big deal.
It is.
For the other thing, the fact is that from now until the time that there are no more, that nobody ever uses any kind of hydrocarbons, Saudi Arabia is still going to be the most important country
Mhm.
in regards to energy. And some of these people will say, oh, well, we have more oil than Saudi Arabia does, and we, blah, 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 and we can be self-sufficient. And I laugh and I say, you don't understand the way the global market works. The reason Saudi Arabia is the top dog here and gets to make these decisions is not because they have more oil than anyone else. It's because they have cheaper oil than anyone else. It costs them nothing to bring it out of the ground, whereas it costs us a lot of money to bring it out of the ground, as it costs the Russians a lot of money bringing it out of the ground. So all of these things have to be balanced. The Saudis can wake up tomorrow and change the and change the kind of global energy economy. They will be able to do so easily. No other country can do that. A cabal of countries like OPEC can come together and do that theoretically. But like the reason why this region is important, not only for oil but for natural gas in the same way, is that this stuff is a lot more complicated
Yeah.
than just saying, oh well, we have our oil, we have this, we're going to go. And I bring that up just to illustrate that when people say, hey, I don't want to have anything to do with that region, it's not a choice, because as soon as you say that, you start to, the bricks start falling, and the consequences of your lack of involvement start start becoming evident. And now that's not to say that you can't have a reasonable foreign policy that is smart and prudent, based on your national interests. I think absolutely you can, but you have to be an adult about it and say, okay, there's a certain amount of stuff we're going to have to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, it's like being an adult. It's exactly like being an adult. I don't like to pay my taxes. I don't like to do all these things. I don't like to work. I would like to sit on the beach all day. And say, well, you can do that actually. You can sit on the beach all day and not work. However, when you're going to run out of money, then you're going to have to come up with
Right.
another solution to that.
Yeah.
And that's really how it is. There's no free lunch when it comes to the world, and when it comes to geopolitics.
Yeah.
Um, and you know what? I think I have to say, like, mea culpa about all of this. I made such a big mistake over the last several years, and I feel like I'm slow motion in the process of like writing a column or a book or something about all the things that I got wrong, about politics. But mostly they all are kind of the same basic idea. And the basic idea is that I was utterly wrong that it's possible to have a coherent, smart, sane argument win. That was my mistake. So, like, you have to go from utter neocon insanity
Uh-huh.
to utter isolationist, primitive insanity. You
Mhm.
can't, there's no such thing as that middle path, because I've tried it. I've tried advocating for it. It's a lonely place.
It is a
And
lonely place.
yeah, yeah. And nobody cares. And in the end, you can come up and you can say, hey, I figured out this great argument, or this great policy that kind of beautifully balances these competing interests together. And here's this philosophy that makes so much sense and is great and blah blah blah. And at the end of the day, what that serves to do more than anything probably is entertain the person who comes up with it,
Yeah.
and sort of flatters their own ego and image of themselves as someone who is able to whatever, to walk between the raindrops and be sophisticated. Because
Yeah.
the final lesson in all of this, as far as I can see over the last many years, is that we just careen from one stupid idea to the opposite, and there's nothing in between. And if you try to have a sane, coherent middle ground, good luck to you.
I want to briefly, and I'm glad we spent way more time talking about the nuts and bolts, because it's so much bigger than just, what happened last week that really got everyone's attention, as far as Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and the reaction to that, which I actually was sort of surprised that was like a lot of people's line in the sand. And I'm like, really? I mean, after everything, like that was the line in the sand. But it seemed to be a wake up call for some people. Now, if you're not online and you don't have a clue what I'm talking about, God bless. Okay. That's what I always say. Good for you. You are winning at life more than I am. But if this is for those who are not caught up, Tucker Carlson had on Nick Fuentes, who is a self-proclaimed Nazi. He constantly advocates for violence against Jews, minorities, women, etc. And he is, in my opinion, not a serious person that anybody would ever talk to or listen to or whatever. But yes, Tucker Carlson had him on and gave him, and it's one thing, like, you can interview serial killers. It's not about like interviewing a bad
Sure,
person.
of course.
It's a matter of, he didn't have him on and actually try to bring light to his bad ideas. He had him on because he agrees with a lot of those bad ideas and he likes for other people to say them for him so that he can keep his hands somewhat clean. Like I always say, I'm like, Nick Fuentes is a Nazi because he says he's a Nazi. And I'm not going to call Tucker Carlson a Nazi, but he's definitely now a Nazi fluffer, right?
Sure.
But
He's a
why
Nazi. He's a Nazi launderer.
yeah,
He's someone who would have a far friendlier conversation with a Nazi than with this Jew.
yeah.
As a matter of fact, I just before we went on, I got a text from my buddy who's, for his sins, he just decided to watch the Dave Smith, Tucker Carlson podcast from a few days ago. And apparently, Tucker comes at me for allegedly attacking his family. Now, I have never, not once, tweeted about his son who works for JD Vance. I have never once attacked his family. I've never once spoken to him or in any way had any kind of direct contact with him. It's funny. It's like
You made the big
uh
time.
yeah, no, but I mean it's weird, and I imagine him sitting on Twitter, with probably with like some kind of an anonymous account. I mean, hey, maybe he's and maybe he replies to me sometimes, with Jew
Anonymous account,
memes.
yeah.
Yeah, but like he's just sitting here and he's just getting mad at Jews criticizing him on Twitter. It's
Mhm.
so weird. It's really weird. I do think that not to not to veer it into kind of psychoanalysis, but the attack on Christian Zionists was especially strange, and the vehemence
Really.
with which he did that was especially strange, considering his dad not only self-identified as a Christian Zionist, but like was, spent the better part of his later years support as a Christian supporting Israel.
Yeah.
A friend of mine was in Israel with Tucker's dad,
Mhm.
and Tucker's dad was on the board of FDD, which is, an organization that Tucker, fulminates against all the time. Um, And I think it's significant, frankly, that maybe a year and a half ago is when Tucker's dad passed away finally after a long illness.
Interesting.
And I do think that there was a marked tonal
Mhm.
shift
Mhm.
after this, as if he thought, hey, now that dad is gone, like, he can't see this.
Interesting.
And, because I think I'm certain that I mean if what we know about Dick Carlson is true, and it seems to be based on interviews and public statements and whatever, I think he would be absolutely horrified at what Tucker is doing now. Absolutely horrified.
The reaction to the interview was what I found the most interesting. Um, and bizarre in a way. The heritage hostage tape was perhaps the most bizarre part of the story to me. Where do you think that came from? I mean, was anybody, there was a very, very mild, from what I could see, um, a group of people on Twitter just sort of like questioning Heritage about whether they were going to continue to partner with Tucker, and then they felt the need to put
it,
out.
it was like an hour of that. It was like an hour of
Yeah,
like, hey, Heritage is, Heritage advertises with with Tucker, don't they? Why is Heritage behind this? In the same way that it's perfectly fair to question any advertisers for for paying for content that that you don't agree with. I
right.
mean, it's a free country. I mean, that's how this stuff
Yeah.
works. And out of nowhere, I mean, we did go from 0 to 60.
Yes.
That out of nowhere comes this weird, disgusting video.
Mhm.
And I do think that there are a lot of people online who really have no idea, oh, I have no problem with the video. Well, I can't help you, but there are many, many problems with that video. Logically, and otherwise. But
Well, and the main issue for me was that the problem is people questioning Tucker having a neo-Nazi on his show, not all of the people that Tucker Carlson is constantly attacking on his show and on other people's shows. Like as if that's not the dividing factor on the right, right? That was the criticism in the video, was that anybody who questions Tucker Carlson are the ones dividing the right, not Tucker Carlson for many years now, constantly berating and attacking people on the right all the time. It's like for the first time ever, more people started criticizing Tucker's one show, and that doesn't matter. That's all that it's all about is dividing the right. It's just that one day, as opposed to all of these years of Tucker constantly attacking people on the right. I don't get it.
yeah, I think it's absolutely cynical that these people are that are offended. I don't think they're offended. I think these people have absolutely no morals. I don't think they're serious.
Yeah.
These are the same people who just attack relentlessly.
Hmm.
There was several weeks ago, there was a discussion about no enemies to the right. And I wrote into the Seth Dillon had a piece, and I wrote into the Free Press in regards to kind of this whole kind of issue. But back then it was kind of theoretical.
Hmm.
And what we've witnessed in the last week is we've witnessed a test drive of no enemies to the right.
Yeah.
And how's it doing? How's it going? Is it satisfying your political longings? Is it scratching the itch of electoral success? Is it working? I mean, my point that I wrote in the Free Press is that this whole conversation is silly because these people are not on the right. Conspiratorial anti-Semitism is not what happens when you get, slightly more right wing than National Review or the Wall Street Journal. Um, the 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 insistence that there's actually a continuum, from like, whatever, Ron DeSantis to Donald Trump to, so and so to a Nazi
Yeah.
is a tremendous I mean, it's a tell. It's a tell of what you feel about the right, of what you feel about this movement. And I just think it's I mean, it's bad on tactical grounds, and it's bad on moral grounds, but to be honest with you, I don't really even care about making the moral argument
Yeah.
because we're so past that. It's 2025, nobody cares. I'm just making the actual nuts and bolts logical argument. And I mean, you don't win with these people. You don't win by bringing in a bunch of yahoos um,
No.
who
And you
who
know what?
don't
I don't
agree
think
with
I'm
the
asking
rest
for
of the
too much
party.
by saying that I don't think that the tent should be big enough to include neo Nazis. I don't think I'm asking for a lot. I don't want them
Um,
in the tent. And then this got brought up. They brought up all this idea of canceling, and
so
I'm not really
dishonest.
sure what the definition of canceling is or isn't. But if it includes kicking actual Nazis out of the tent, okay, fine.
Well, my old friend Ace of Spades had two amazing posts about this whole controversy, and the second one is the one um, that is germane to this discussion, the one that he just put up, like not long ago. And in it, he goes back and says, "Well, as a matter of fact, politics is all about canceling. Politics is literally about that. It is about, here are the people that here are the people that I agree with and support, and here are the people that I don't agree with and I don't
Sure.
support."
Yeah.
And our idea of cancel culture, what our whole problem with cancel culture wasn't that people were getting rejected for beliefs that others didn't agree with. It was that people who were civilians, who were not involved in politics,
Hmm.
suddenly became political figures. Whereas, like,
They're getting
if
doxxed and harassed and
right, if
fired from
you're
their
an
jobs that had nothing
architect,
to do with politics whatsoever. That's all
right,
very different. And actually, if there was any example of canceling over the last couple of weeks, I'm failing to remember the name of the organization, but it's the sub-organization of Heritage where the email got leaked
right,
from the president, saying that anybody who simply retweeted saying like we shouldn't have Nazis in the Republican Party who worked for Heritage should never be hired again.
yeah. How interesting, the five Jews at Heritage, who spoke up, and it just happens to be the ones who are on the blacklist. I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
But if you want to say anything's cancel culture, I mean, that's definitely, an example of that. But I think that's a great point that, yeah, that's what politics is. You choose the people that you agree with and that you don't agree with to have
Right,
conversations with, to platform, to promote, and that's also called freedom of association.
right. Yeah, our idea that cancel culture is, I mean, canceling is not bad. Cancel culture is turning someone who is like a plumber into a political actor,
Right.
like he's running for president, and making that person's life wide open to media operations
Right.
and destruction.
Hmm.
Like, that's ridiculous. However, if you're part of the political process, we can say, you know what, you're full of crap and you're awful and I don't want anything to do with you. And in fact, the people who associate with you, I don't want anything to do with either, because obviously they don't have a functioning filter for who's worth
Morality.
associating with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would commend Ace's post to you and to everyone about this, because he's kind of very clear about this.
Hmm.
But that's where we are.
Yeah.
That's where we are. On one hand, I think like maybe we'll make it. On the other hand, I think we're utterly doomed. Um, so
Real sunny end, end to this.
yeah, yeah. It's funny because I got a call from a friend of mine who is a another political commentator, and we spoke for 2 hours the other night about all of this stuff. And before he hung up, he said, "I feel a lot better. Thank you." And I was
Interesting.
like, in my entire life, I never heard anyone respond that way at the end of a conversation.
That's
So,
funny. Oh, that's
you
interesting.
know,
I think I know who it is, so that's even more interesting. Um,
yeah,
well, I think that's a good way to wrap up. So this conversation made some other people feel better, and maybe some people had the opposite reaction. But yeah, no, I'm very concerned about where this is headed. I think there are a lot of especially disaffected young men who are just very angry. They're not conservative. They did vote for Trump, but they're not conservatives. And I worry that they're falling prey to some of this. And I guess my final word out to people on the right is in the same way that you should be giving over to your children the tools that they need to not become communists, you need to be giving your tools over to your children. And I feel and fear that a lot of Republican and conservative parents are failing at this. The tools that they need not to fall for the oldest lie in the book in neo-Nazi propaganda. So anyway,
I'm glad you brought that up because I mean I don't have kids, but I know a lot of I have a lot of friends who do have kids, and several who have done very, very good jobs and making sure that their sons don't go off and become Nazis. You would think, that this would be kind of a low bar, but in this civilization in 2025, apparently it's quite a big deal.
mhm,
I do think that, I mean, you remember the Michelle Malkin story, right?
mhm, mhm,
Michelle Malkin was sort of the first one to go from mainstream to neo-Nazi alongside Nick Fuentes.
mhm.
And why did it happen? Well, nobody could figure it out until I think she discussed it in some way. And she said, she's got two kids and two boys, and they went deep into this stuff.
Yeah,
And it was her choice. She said, either I'm going to fight them and, and lose them, or I'm going to, whatever, maintain my relationship with my sons. And
wow.
like, yeah, man, that's really heavy and sad and terrifying. Um, but it makes me think that there are folks who are out there now who are, who are online, who are sort of like defending Tucker and defending Fuentes and maybe even Tucker himself, who have boys,
Yeah.
sons
But
who
I'm
are deep
sorry
into this.
if your children are falling for this, you
Oh, that's a
failed.
you thing. That's a you thing. Oh, yeah, yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, like you failed as a parent because you did not give them the tools necessary to be discerning, and you did not educate them on the history of the world correctly, like the truth, the absolute truth, well enough. I'm sorry, you just didn't.
Yeah. And
Uh,
look, I agree with that, and I think that frankly, there's only so much you can blame the left for this.
mhm.
There's only so much you can blame, a lot of people like to blame the schools and the media and the failure of, churches and other religious institutions. Okay, yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree, at the end of the day, but I know a lot of people that never went Nazi.
Bingo.
There's no law that, that pushes me in that direction.
Mhm, mhm.
And I mean, look, and what ends up happening is, I mean, at the end of the day, and I say this all the time, when people are accusing me of thinking only of kind of parochial Jewish interests, um, and I come back and I say, like, look, I have been to Israel. I know that country very well. They are not going anywhere. I'm not worried about them. They can take care of all the problems that they need to take care of because their people are brilliant, and they have heart, and they're patriots, and they have, big families, and they're happy, and they are not social media addicts.
Right.
You
You're
can
worried
see
about
this.
us.
You can see I'm worried about us,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And if America decides to go down this path of like total retardation, it'll be what it'll be, but it'll be tragic
yeah,
and and sad and utterly preventable. it'll
yeah,
be it'll be the most self-indulgent thing a civilization had probably ever done, tied very closely with, like, the gender insanity.
yeah. Yes, yes. I
Yeah.
absolutely put it in that same category. I think it's the new queer theory or something nuts like that. But no, let's leave it there. I really, really appreciate you coming on and doing this show with me. Like I said, it's been on my heart and my mind for a while to do this. Tell people how they can find you.
You can find me at Twitter, DaveReaboi at Twitter,
Mhm.
and look for my piece at Tablet coming soon on Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, and anti-Semitism and the Jews.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much. You have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
That's it for the Liberty Lobbyist. You can find me on Twitter at Melissa Blasek NH or at Rebuild NH. You can always email me any questions, comments, concerns that might be interesting after this show. Director at rebuildnh.com. Until next time.